Hi and welcome to this video on the Rotor Controller from Melbourne Instruments. The Rotor Control is a MIDI controller that features motorized knobs. And not only are the knobs motorized, but they are also featuring haptic feedback. So it's gonna feel quite peculiar to turn these knobs when you have them attached to different parameters in your music application. Right, so in this video I'm going to walk you through some of the functionalities of the Rotor Control, and we're going to look at how you can use this as a performance control. At the moment of making this video, the Rotor Control is compatible with Ableton Live and also with Bitwig Studio. The Rotor Control also works with other type of MIDI gear in the specific MIDI mode, and that way you can control your hardware synths or any type of device that accepts MIDI data. Melbourne Instruments sends me this Rotor Control, but aside from that they have no say over this video. But let's begin in the mix mode here and take a look at how we can use the Rotor Control as a MIDI performance controller. So here we have a project in the Bitwig Studio and we have a few different tracks. With the arrow buttons here we can walk through the different track sets. We have 8 tracks that we can control at any given time, and as you can see here, it's very satisfying. When we walk through the different pages, we can see how the motorized faders will reflect the volumes of the current set of tracks we have control over. And at any given time, we can have 8 tracks to control at the same time. And currently we have these buttons at the bottom, which are like regular keyboard buttons, on-off switches, and with these we can mute different tracks in our project. In mix mode, if we want to change the behavior of the different knobs or buttons, we can just press and hold the select button, and we can change the knob here from volume to panning or to control the sound effects. At the same time, we can change the button from mute, solo to arm recording. So it's gonna be super easy to activate a few different tracks in your DAW if you want to record multiple tracks at the same time. Let's change that to mute again, and we're gonna control volume. So let's go to transport mode, and here we can control play, stop, record, overdub, looping mode, punch in, out, and restore automation. So let's just play back this track. As you can see, we get a very fine and smooth control over the volumes with the knobs. So it seems to be a very high resolution knobs and data transfer from the Rotor Control. Aside from the mix page, we also have a second mode called the plugin mode. So let's go to the plugin mode, and as you can see, we get control over a lot of stuff here on this track. At any time, we can also select what track we want to work with. Just hold the function, and we're gonna work with the kick. So let's go back to the plugin mode, and you can see that we can control the tuning. It's really cool. You can see straight out of the box here we have instant control over the different parameters, these different macros for this instrument. And if you want to control something else on this same track, we can just close this view by pressing the left and right arrows, like so. And let's add something like a delay effect after the kick. When you're on an empty page like this, we can always learn one of these knobs or buttons to a parameter in Bitwig, so press the learn key and touch one of these knobs, and you will see it sets learning, and we go to a parameter in Bitwig and we just touch that control. So let's set it to control the mix of the delay, and the Rotor Control will learn the range of this parameter, so you can see the parameter moving. Now let's deactivate the learning, and we can control the mix with the knob. And you can see it snap back to the max value. And it's also gonna snap back to the 0 value, to the lowest value. And if we want to change the current active plugin that we're controlling, we can just hold the select button here and select either the kick or select the delay again. If we press and release on the select button, we can also activate and deactivate plugins. So let's run the kick and do some delay mixing. Now let's play back the track. And you can see that motorized knob dance along with your track. Okay, so we're gonna remove that automation actually, because I don't want to have that in the track. Okay, so let's look at a little music performance here using the plugin mode, and I'm gonna use the different remote macros. So I'm just selecting the project remotes in Bitwig, and we go into plugin mode here, and we can see all these parameters available. Another really cool thing here regarding haptic feedback, if we take a look at these different parameters we have available. In the remote control, we can see that the drum mute here is an on-off switch. And with the rotor control on the switch and on-off switch, you can really feel that snapping on and off. And you can hear that little tick. And the same here with time base, which is like a snapping function to change the LFO rate. So we can change it to like 8 notes, 16 notes. And with that one you also feel the haptic feedback and the snapping. So it's very tactile, extremely tactile feeling to work with the rotor control as a mixing tool. So let's fire the arrangement. And again, it's important to point out that the parameters that you learn in the rotor control, they are stored within the device. So even if you disconnect it here from my setup and bring it to a computer somewhere else, and we hook this up, it will still remember the settings here for the Valhalla Supermassive parameters. So that's really effective, and the really nice thing is that even if you switch between different tracks, it's going to control the Valhalla Supermassive plugin on that specific track. So as you can see, it's a very, very tactile experience working with the rotor control. Okay, so next up, let's take a look at the motion recorder. So we need to change the mode from plugin to MIDI. And in the MIDI mode, we can press this like a tape recorder button, and we go into motion recorder. And here we have some features like play, stop, record, erase, forward, backwards, and random, and ping pong. So first we obviously need some kind of parameter to work with, and I think we can maybe automate the vocal sample volume here with the motion control, the motion recorder. Now you can see that I already have 2 parameters learned on these 2 knobs, but we can always delete parameters by holding learn and tapping these buttons. Press clear. Also gonna clear this one. So press learn, and we're gonna learn this knob, and we're gonna attach it to the vocal sample volume. And there we go. And now we can go into the motion recorder and press record. And do some fun stuff like this. And you can see that the motorized fader will instantly play back that weird automation I did. Let's try using the motion recorder to move the panning of the gated pad, maybe from left to right, sweep a little bit. So we're gonna go into learn, and we're gonna move that first knob, and we're gonna move the panning. Now we can control the panning of the gated pad. And if we go into function, we can actually set the length, so we're gonna set it to 32. And let's go back to the motion recording, and let's hit record. And let's play back the track. And my guess is that the motion recorder here is going to be extremely valuable and useful if you don't have a DAW at hand, and maybe if you just have the rotor control hooked up to a synthesizer. So that's how the motion recorder works. Okay, some final words here on the rotor control. It's of course going to be very personal if you prefer to have motorized knobs that show you the actual representation of the values from your music application, compared to something like the Komplete Control or other MIDI controller where you can see the value on the screen, but the knobs will not represent the actual values that you have in the DAW. And it's of course very sweet to actually have the knobs follow the automation, because then you know if you start to turn the knobs here, it's going to be from that specific value in your music application, compared to like having a latch mode where you really need to turn the knob to that exact value before the value starts to change in automation. The rotor control ships with a separate power adapter, but during my tests here we were powering the rotor control only via USB directly from the computer, and it worked all fine here during my tests. But obviously if you're gonna use the rotor control only with MIDI hardware gear, of course you need to power it via the bundled power adapter. And then you can use the MIDI input, output and the MIDI through to connect the rotor control to other MIDI gear. My personal impression of the rotor control is that it's a very high quality MIDI controller, and the knobs here feel extremely high quality. And as I mentioned, that tactile feel when you move a knob when it's attached to a parameter that's like an on-off switch or something like that's the stepped values, it's gonna feel very satisfying. Now these other buttons on the MIDI controller, they are like regular keyboard buttons, so they'll probably stand the test of time. Alternatives to the rotor control might be the Fader Port 8 from Presonus, although it has motorized faders, which means it's gonna take a lot more real estate from your desktop. Okay, so that's my little review here of the rotor control. The price for the rotor control, I think it's around $400 at the making of this video. And by all means, if you have any type of questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. If you want to learn more about using the rotor control with Bitwig specifically, check my second YouTube channel, Matthias Bitwig Lab, and we'll look at more in depth how to use the rotor control. My name is Matthias, don't forget to subscribe, see you in the next video, bye!